And we're live. I don't know why I keep doing that. It's not even funny anymore. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well, I guess. Today, because it was on, we're going to be addressing some of the questions from Prime Minister's Questions. Now, if any of you have watched this before, there's a very simple format. The Prime Minister will be asked 6 questions by the Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn. The Prime Minister will typically respond and then make some quip. It's hilarious. Anyway, today's subject is Brexit. I didn't actually think this would make up so much of Prime Minister's Questions, but it did. And there are a few aspects of it I want to cover, and it will cause me to deviate slightly. It's also going to make me look remarkably inconsistent, because I don't generally take sides as far as party goes. I don't support the Tories, I don't support Labour. And no, I'm not a filthy green DUP, SNP, I'm not a Liberal Democrat, if they are even a party still. I'm more of a I vote on the policy, not on the party. How's that? And there are going to be moments where Theresa May says something, hello Dylan, says something really stupid, and I'm going to point it out. And there are questions I'm not featuring that I want to mention it. How stupid she is, that is. But also parts where Jeremy Corbyn also is an absolute bellend. They both are. Whether it be cringy jokes that Theresa May mentions later on. Oh, yeah, the cringe. Or whether it be Jeremy Corbyn forgetting to do the one thing he's supposed to do in an event called Prime Minister's Questions. Yeah, me too, a patch century. Cool name. Also, as you noticed from the title, the thumbnail, if you noticed it, it's not really much of one, is it? I mentioned interruptions, because it happens a couple of times, and it's quite amusing, because today you have some contradictions, because one minute you have, and it's quite, I think this is amusing, maybe it's not contradictions, but just amusing. John Bercow interrupts twice. At one point he'll say, we have recently had a report on harassment, let's try to behave properly in these sessions, and then later he'll tell the MPs, I could not care less about the press gallery. Huge numbers of people outside this place disapprove of this sort of behaviour. But also another thing, and I'm going to mention it now, because I'm wondering if there's going to be any fallout. So we have a set of rules in Parliament. Parliamentary proceedings. Things that are considered parliamentary and unparliamentary. For example, you don't get a round of applause in Parliament. You get jeering. That is a custom that has been upheld, yes, for a very, very long time. Like, longer than quite a number of countries have existed. And we also have others that include language. So at one point, I'm gonna mention it. The camera's gonna pan to Boris Johnson, saying the following words, or we believe he did. It does look like he did say this. He replied, "What? That's bollocks." The camera really chose the right moment to sort of focus on him. It was glorious. I have to admit, I did find it hard not to laugh. And I did, when this was going on, I looked at the PMQ hashtag because it was trending today. And there were other topics being brought up, and I'm going to mention some of them when we go through this. There was also another question, and I'm going to cover it now because I think this is something rather stupid. The Prime Minister tries to celebrate the fact that, or almost seeming like it's a good thing, that we can celebrate changing the colour of our passport as a benefit of Brexit. Thing is, and it took me 5 minutes to find this out, we could have done that anyway. We actually could. So I think it's actually rubbish. It's quite funny that she tried to get away with that. But no one did call her out. Basically, the whole thing is that there is no EU legislation dictating the passport colour. Although, if that was one of the reasons people voted to leave, wow, just wow. Yeah. Now, let's see, where am I going? Oh, yes, I was meant to be going to the live dashboard because I wasn't paying enough attention. Here we are. I am so close, yeah. I hadn't noticed, James. Yeah, I don't do swearing very well. And yes, Boris does love a game of whiff-waff. Right. So, on that subject, let's get into this with the first question. Well, I ignored the first part because there was already two questions and then Jeremy Corbyn. There was an interruption in there. There'll be, I think, 2 interruptions during Corbyn's questions. Is it 2 or 1? Doesn't matter. But another thing, just before I put up the first question, he focuses on Brexit for the whole thing, and we're going to talk about it in some depth, I guess. I mean, I'm not as smart as quite a lot of people on this subject. But I did a little searching and research. I did a little. I'm quite tired today. I had overtime, okay. And so I've got some extra information, but I haven't got the images for it. But I have linked some in the description if you are interested. At either looking Gulag, yes. If you're either interested in watching Prime Minister's questions or reading the Hansard, the whole transcript, including interruptions, which I think is amazing. Right. Oh, what was it? You know what? I don't know why I do this. I start talking about something else, and then it's almost like I have ADD, and I suddenly decide, wait, shiny thing. I could talk about that for a minute and forget what I was originally going to talk about, because I'm a genius, of course. Ugh. So, yesterday, the Brexit Secretary assured the country that Brexit will not plunge Britain, quotes, into a Mad Max-style world borrowed from dystopian fiction. Does the Prime Minister not feel that the Brexit Secretary could set the bar just a little bit higher? Okay, I tend to agree with Corbyn on this. And I've written some notes down, I'm just going to find them. It won't take a second. I caught Downs off Irate Bear. It's sexually transmitted. Right, so I wrote some notes down for this particular question because it bugged me. Davis could have chosen any other metaphor, but went with an extreme to try and either exaggerate on what critics say, or simply to make those aforementioned critics look silly. It obviously didn't work. Now, in the description is a BBC-linked article with a video of some of that particular speech. Okay, and some of the things he gave in that speech in Vienna, Austria, included British business could never be cheaper than China and must focus instead on product and service quality. This is actually somewhat true. I buy some clothes from China, like hoodies, and it's hilarious, right? I feel fat-shamed just ordering it, okay? I think I ordered just to get just to wear a hoodie over a hoodie because I wanted it because it was really cold and I can't be bothered to buy a coat. I bought a second hoodie that had to be an XL, but to order that in Chinese sizes, there's a few more X's on that. I felt fat shamed, but the quality is there, and so when you instead focus on product and service quality, you've got to be something up. Okay, they're going to get service quality because unless they're English speaking in the factory where they made my. Well, let's see, what else did I buy recently? I tell you what, I did buy a splitter from China. It's a USB splitter for audio and microphones. When I first started on YouTube, I had a very cheap £7 condenser mic, but I had an audio jack. I only had one audio port on my laptop at the time, the Asus X500CCX. It was an Asus. Okay, it was a piece of. It was okay. I've still got it under my desk here in its original box. It only had that one audio port, so I had to get a USB splitter so it would recognise the microphone as a microphone. The product was perfect, but if it was faulty, who do I call? Who do I call at all? The answer is no one, because the number they gave me wasn't real. Honestly. Other things he said. Brexit deal by the end of 2018 was, quotes, well on the cards. There have been claims and reports, and I'm not going to take a side on this, as to whether or not it could be completed by the end of 2018, or whether we would need 24 months or 2 years to conclude the negotiations. I am not interested in this. My view on this is quite simple. 17 point something million, because I can't remember the exact number, voted to leave. 16 point something voted to remain. You guys are not going to win either way, but the people that voted to leave won. Therefore you must deliver, and Article 50 was triggered, so we have to finish this by a set date, which I believe is March 2019. I think. Or was it November 2018? Can't remember. Don't care. If you are unable to do that, then you are not the correct person for the job. It seems a bit callous, but at the same time, if you are the right person for the job, you should just keep doing this. Reassure people. Although I get that a lot of people just don't trust you on principle. And this is where another thing that comes up in Parliament bugs me a lot, where people will instead attack the party for what the previous administration that they had that was in power did. I want to base my view on the actions of the current government on what they are currently doing. But at the same time, I understand that with certain policies that certain oppositions have that I don't entirely support, because they sound very similar, eerily familiar to New Labour, I kind of get the argument, but at the same time it's quite tiring. Other things he said. It is possible to leave the EU and customs union if both sides recognised each other's standards and regulations, promising the UK will continue our track record of meeting high standards once outside the EU. I don't see a problem with that. That actually seems quite reasonable and quite neutral. I wrote a few other bits here. They fear that Brexit could lead to an Anglo-Saxon race to the bottom. I would assume that is some of the critics. Yes. Now, there's a debate here that was on the Daily Politics show between Chuka Umunna, if I pronounced that wrong, I just don't give a fuck. Let's call you Chuck. And Ian Duncan Smith. This was debated on the speech, and it is quite interesting. And I encourage people interested in that speech and in Brexit, to watch it for themselves and make up their own mind on what they believe. Ian Duncan Smith was put on the spot a number of times by Chuck, and he did rebut him. He offered to give him evidence. It was a bit heated. It was interesting though at the same time. I have an additional note here before we go on to the answer and the additional note. The answer and the second question. That's what I meant. It's already come out that some civil servants bungled which data was meant to go into the Brexit impact study. The Brexit impact study. Okay, so I do have an article pulled up, but I don't have the images. Where is it? Is this it? Here it is. Right. So, and we get to talk about this for a minute. A group of leading economists have revealed that civil servants inputted the wrong data into the Brexit impact study, with the result that it suggested leaving the EU would damage the economy. This is on the Express. I'm not... The problem with any news site, and it doesn't matter what you say, someone's going to say they're biased. It's all about interpreting who you hold much stock with. I could say this was on the Daily Mail, I'd get flayed. I could say it's on the Independent, I'd get flayed. The Express is... I don't really know what the Express is actually. Anyway, I'm going to read a few more bits of this and then we'll get to the answer, because this is relevant. A detailed investigation by economists for free trade has shown that when government policy on Brexit and its key objectives are used, when the British economy will in fact grow by between 2 and 4% better than if the UK had stayed in the EU. The alternative Brexit impact assessment has now been passed on to Cabinet Ministers to inform the crucial discussion of the Brexit subcommittee on Thursday. It also reveals that a no-deal scenario gives Britain a £651 billion boost when the EU would lose £507 billion. Whether you believe that from the economists for free trade or not is up to you. I just don't care. I voted leave. I expect us to leave. This includes the union, the customs union. This includes a few other things, I'm sure. I'm not sure about the courts, because there are other aspects of this that are going to come up, and we will get to that in a moment, I think. Have I missed anything in the chat? Because I'm special and I have so many tabs open. Let's see. Chucky B, yes. Free market, democratic, socialist, revolution, nothing to negotiate, out is out, and we just mirror EU on tariffs. I am totally in agreement. Yeah. Right, so the answer. As the right honourable gentleman knows, we are very clear that that we are going to ensure that when we leave the European Union, we are able to take back control of our borders, our money, and our laws. Hello, Laura. It's not like it's only been, what, 10 minutes since I spoke to you? Yeah. The only fiction in relation to Brexit and the European Union is the Labour Party's front bench, who cannot even agree with themselves on what the policy is. This brings up actually something else of interest. I believe, who was it? Andrew Neil absolutely annihilated someone, I believe, and I hate Andrew Neil. Okay, firstly, I can't tell if the hair on his head is real or not. It looks like it could be a wig, but I'm not sure. Because the guy has such a high hairline. It's just ridiculous. Okay, and so there are contradictions, because some have said that they respect the will of the people and they think we should leave. Others have said that a deal could be hashed out to exist within it. And I have too many tabs open. This is going to get stupid. Okay, so who was it and where was it? Right, I've got it here. Andrew Neil demanded the Shadow Secretary of State for Local Government explain what indication Labour has got from the EU officials that Brussels will be willing to create some form of customs union after Brexit. Jeremy Corbyn has said the UK will have to have a customs union with the EU after Brexit, suggesting Labour is pushing for a softer Brexit position. Mr Gwynn was forced to justify Labour's Brexit stance while speaking to BBC Daily Politics. He was pressed on what kind of customs union Labour is after. He then said, "It's down to a negotiation, but it may differ in the sense that we retain access to tariff-free trade with the European Union, which is not possible. But we also have the freedom to enter into third-party negotiations on free trade with other countries." Does that not feel like you're just being a bit of a bitch about this? Neil hit back and said, "So you think we can be in a customs union and still have the right to negotiate free trade agreements?" He added, "Do you really have a single sign? The slightest sliver of a sign that the European Union is prepared to agree to us being in a customs union and to negotiate our own free trade agreement." It does not say like you're saying, yeah, we'll give you this. We'll stay in the customs union, but you got to let us trade elsewhere, even though the EU doesn't let anyone else do that. I don't think they do. I wonder what's the deal with Norway, because they have a deal with them, but they're not in the union. But I don't think they're a part of the EU either. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, the point is, he's basing it on an assumption that the EU will allow this or negotiate this. How do you negotiate it? You've just put it out there. How do you negotiate from a position where you've just put your cards on the table and said, "That's my hand. What you going to do about it?" This is the problem, and a lot of criticism other Labour members have gotten. When they levy at the Prime Minister, they want her to lay out everything she intends to do, which will then be seen by the public, which will then be seen by everyone. You're essentially, it's like you're holding a card at you're holding a card, so you're playing poker, and you just put them, you have just shown your cards to everyone else and been like, "Yeah, I don't need a poker face, because that's what I got." That's not how you do this. Your negotiation strategy is no better than simply bending over and spreading your cheeks and going, "Be gentle." Anyway, he was absolutely vilified for it, and rightly so, because honestly, it's not a negotiation strategy in the slightest. Next, one of the Prime Minister's former Brexit ministers in the other place, House of Lords, he doesn't like saying that, does he, warned her that Britain will be walking a gangplank into thin air. Yeah, they have a special deal. Yeah. If she does not decide what she actually wants on leaving the European Union, but she... I hate to say this, but honestly, she has said this so many times what she wants. She stated it in multiple Prime Minister's questions. It is getting quite silly now. In his speech, the Brexit Secretary also said that fears about a deregulatory race to the bottom were based on nothing. Why then did his own department's exit analysis state that there could be opportunities for Britain in deregulating areas such as environment and employment law? I'm not as well informed on environment and employment law, but I do know where this is going. This is going to be talking about... Oh, fucking... Hang on. I know exactly... I've got the thing pulled up. No, not that. I believe there's a law on labour... He's talking about the UK's labour law. Basically. There's another name for it. I think it's something directive. Workers' Trade Directive, I think. And we have... There's a... that's basically an EU law. Which we will get onto... Oh yeah, Working Time Directive. That's what it's called. We will get onto this, but not yet, because it's not actually relevant just yet. But we do get a chance then to look at EU law on this and UK's law on this, because there is a difference, and I am actually somewhat concerned with how the UK intends to proceed, because I'm not too sure how they can. So, the Right Honourable Gentleman talks about what we actually want to achieve when we leave the European Union. I will tell him what we want to achieve. We want to ensure that this is a country that can negotiate free trade deals around the rest of the world. I'm on board with that. We want to ensure that we have a good trade agreement with the European Union. I'm on board with that. Which won't be tariff-free, let's face it. And that is what we will be starting to negotiate, and we want to ensure that we have a good security partnership with the European Union, as I set out in detail in my speech in Munich, which she got flayed for. Even Angela Merkel on the stage with her was flaying her for it. But I don't know whether it was actually that bad, to be honest. What can you say? It's Theresa May. She, unlike her predecessor, isn't very good at confidently cracking a joke. And you can tell. I was watching a very old PMQ with Cameron, and he flayed Miliband. Flayed him. He flayed Gordon Brown. He flayed Tony Blair. He flayed Jeremy Corbyn. He was very good at it. It was because of that. I don't know, maybe it's just his voice as well. It didn't break as easily. He was easily more confident than Theresa May. And that makes her quite weak, because she doesn't have that confidence to match any kind of arrogance she can try and portray. Anyway. And we want to ensure that we have good... Right, hang on. As I said in detail in my speech in Munich last week, but we also want to ensure that this country takes the opportunities that will be open to us outside the European Union to boost our economy and to ensure that we develop the economy of the future and jobs for the future. More high-paid, high-skilled jobs for people in this country. We are putting the people first. That last statement is debatable. A lot of people will question it, and I'm quite happy for people to do that, because people, as I stated earlier, will question the Conservatives' track record. Millipede was, oh, he was so bad. Miliband, okay, when being interviewed by Jeremy Paxman, I think he got asked if he could be scary or something, and I think he replied he could be, and I could not cringe any harder. You just can't make this shit up. It's almost adorable when a guy that looks like Wallace from Wallace and Gromit, honestly, if someone went up to Miliband and gave him a piece of Wensleydale, I think he would actually eat it with a cracker in front of you. Probably look like plasticine too. Hello Viper Sword. Hashtag Viper Sword is cute. So next question. Right. There it is. In December, the Foreign Secretary and Environment Secretary were briefing that the Working Time Directive would be scrapped. Now this we will talk about soon, I promise. The CBI and the unions are very clear that they are not looking for a bonfire of regulations, quite the opposite. Basically, they just want to keep what we have because it means that we don't have to put any effort or time into sorting out our own shit. Lazy cunts. The only party that wants to scrap workers' regulations and protections is the party opposite. The Tories, yeah. In her Lancaster House speech a year ago, the Prime Minister clearly stated, "I also want tariff-free trade with Europe." Now, a year on, she has downgraded that aim to, and I just want to state this quite clearly, what she wanted. This is one of those times, I have to say this actually, yeah. What the party has to do and what she wants aren't necessarily the same thing. It's why when you've pushed her on asking her about would she want a separate or a second referendum, she hasn't given that answer. Because it's not her place to give the answer like that. She would want a second referendum, of course she would. She would want to stop this because she's a Remain voter. But she has to respect the will of the people. That is her job. It is unparliamentary to put her on the spot to give a personal opinion, because that personal opinion doesn't mean, well, even she knows it just means dick. Nothing. It's absolute dick. Right. So why have the government abandoned that for, quotes, as tariff-free as possible? Okay, so now we get to talk about the Working Time Directive. The Working Time Directive is basically EU law. It's a directive of the European Union. And I'm looking at an article. I should have linked this. I might link it later. It was created in 2003. It gives EU workers the right to at least 4 weeks paid holiday, rest breaks, and rest of at least 11 hours in any 24 hours, and restricts excessive night work, a day off after a week's worth work, and provides for a right of work no more than 48 hours per week. Basically, it limits how many hours people can work. This affects truckers in Europe actually quite badly. Yeah, they're such a fan of it as well. That's why they got on strike so much. There are aims and definitions of it. Health and safety being one. Minimum standards directive is also a part of this. Now, on the .gov website, which I've linked below, there is what we call it maximum weekly working hours, and I'll give you the overview. So, you can't work more than 48 hours a week on average, normally averaged over 17 weeks. This law is sometimes called the Working Time Directive or Working Time Regulations. You can, however, choose to work more by opting out of the 48-hour week. However, if you're under 18, you can't work more than 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week. And I feel bad for you guys, by the way, because I was able to work 60 hours a week when I was 17. And I was quite happy doing it because I wanted money. I think I was making like £5.25 an hour or something. I fucking well needed the money back then as well. So there are exceptions to this. And you may have to work more than 48 hours a week on average if you work in a job, and these are the points, where 24-hour staffing is required, in the armed forces, emergency services or police, in security and surveillance, as a domestic servant in a private household, as a seafarer, sea fisherman or worker on vessels or on inland waterways, where working time is not measured and you're in control, self-employed, or a managing executive with control over your decisions. Now, I actually, to an extent, quite kind of support this law, and I forgot to look this up. I wanted to find out who introduced 0-hour contracts, because this is interesting, because this is important as well, if my browser will pull it up. So, who actually introduced it? Okay, doesn't matter. I want to know who actually did. I thought it might be Blair and Brown, to be honest. It sounds about right. I think it was introduced, let's see, in 1998 under the National Minimum Wage Act, possibly? No. Maybe it was introduced earlier. I don't support 0-hour contracts. Ever. I was technically on one for about 2.5 years. Even though I was working full-time. Don't support it. You have no rights at all. So as far as I'm concerned, that is not job security. That is constantly living in fear of losing your job. Now, I believe the Conservative Party has done more to actually clamp down on these, and they certainly claim to have done this. Whether they have or not, though, that is debatable. And plenty of people can argue this if you want. It was Blair. I'm pretty sure it was. It was if it was introduced in I think some relevant parts of it were mentioned in 1998. It's possible. Go figure, right? I know that it was considered a good thing for employment because, and I know Sports Direct are guilty of this. They abused this 0-hour contract stuff. I think I got offered a job with them once, and when I went to go and look at the contract, they were like, "Yeah, you've got 4 hours at most, but you'll probably be working 20 to 30 hours probably." Like, you fucking what? I'm not doing a potential 30 hours. I want 30 hours. It's interesting that the job centre were also pushing this. Like, yeah, take it. Like, you fucking what? You're not putting me in a position where I feel safe financially. I don't like being on benefits. I'm not on benefits now, by the way. But when I was on job seekers allowance, I was like, at least you guys pay me on time. I can't accept a job where I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to pay anything afterwards. And Dylan, I might stream a little 7 Days to Die after I've done here, because I'm quite enjoying my hunting and I want to kill more stuff. And I think with 0 hours, it's quite scary. So with the working time directive, I tend to support it because I think it's a good benchmark. And I think if we have to, we should enshrine that in our own law. So make it a British law. I think that has to happen to protect British workers. And I think we need to abolish 0-hour contracts. Whether that's feasible or not, I don't know. It's not my place to try and understand it, because honestly, it's way over my head. I don't think I get paid enough for that, ever. So, where's the answer? Oh, I need to go to OBS for that, don't I? Right. I have to say to the right honourable gentleman, I like the fact that she's constantly replied with this. It's very polite. There was a certain some points in this in the video you'll notice if you watch it that Theresa May doesn't look at her little folder. She knew what to say. She didn't have to get him because the questions were weak. And I think they were to an extent. I mean, they were very cleverly picked. I think they were trying to pick on little bits that could have thrown her, but I think it kind of stretched. It didn't work. There are a few moments where I have to say also Theresa May fucking embarrasses everyone. But at the same time, the way it was received, comments on it make me wonder, and I'll get to it later. So I have to say to the right honourable gentleman that the government have not abandoned their negotiating position in relation to this. We will be ensuring that we get that good. What? We will be ensuring that we get that good. Get good. Comprehensive trade agreement. New economic partnership with the European Union. He also mentions workers' rights. I have been clear since I became Prime Minister that this government will not only protect workers' rights but enhance them. Let us look at the Conservative government's record in government. Which government? Damn, you say government a lot. Which government took action on 0-hour contracts? It was the Conservative government, not Labour, probably because Labour's introduced it. Which government got Matthew Taylor to report on the new economy so that we ensure workers get the highest rights? It was the Conservative government, not Labour. Which government are ensuring that workers' voices are heard on the boards of companies? It is the Conservative government, not Labour. Probably because most of the companies that she talks to came back to the country after Labour tried to fleece them. Anyway. Next. Oh, okay, this is pathetic. So, you can already see there's a really short response from the Prime Minister. This is the very first time I saw her not look at her clipboard or folder of precious little notes. And I realised, oh wow, you threw away a good opportunity here. So, I do not know whether the Prime Minister has had a chance to read the Daily Telegraph today. How many newspapers are there in this country? Honestly, I don't think any Prime Minister has time to read all of them. And do they still have page 3? I like page 3. There's a lot of information on there, and you get some philosophy with those tits. So, but 62 of her backbenchers want a bonfire of regulations and to destroy workers' rights in this country. When the government's EU exit analysis was published, the Brexit Minister, the Under Secretary of State for Exiting the European Union, the Honourable Member for Worcester, Americans it's Worcester, okay, said, "It does not consider our desired outcome. Will the Prime Minister take this opportunity now to tell the House and the country what is the government's desired outcome?" I have to just say, there's context here. Because that's quite a nice little quote, isn't it? I think most of us can agree there needs to be context. So, right. Cool. There's context to this, and it is very important. So, what I'm going to do, I pulled out the Hansard. Maybe later. I'm going to pull up the Hansard from when that question or that comment was brought up, and so you then have the full context of what was said. Aww. So this is where the quote comes from. So, and another thing, and I love this, right? You'll notice the third as an interruption. Will the minister give way? This is a fantastic part of Parliament. I love it. Okie native, quite right. Almost. The wonderful thing about our Parliament is that you can do this, because when a secretary or minister is giving a speech or going through a paper or having a debate, a discussion, anything, except for example, the financial bullcrap the Chancellor of the Exchequer does. I don't know what he called it. Budget. That's what it is. Yes. Don't get interruptions then. There's a wonderful thing about this interruption because it shows that we're allowed to allow others to not just throw you off course and put you on a spot, but they do actually put you on the spot and make it difficult for you. You have a speech, and you can decide if you'll give way or not. Now, I've noticed a couple of times in the past, I think Corbyn was giving a speech. I think Theresa May, was doing it first. And Theresa May kept giving way to everyone. She really did. Okay? And then it was either Keir Starmer. No, it wasn't. It was David Davis. David Davis was doing it. He was giving way all the time. And then when Keir Starmer stood up, he didn't give way once. In fact, he only gave way. He only gave way when Labour ministers wanted to interrupt him. And next to him was Diane Abbott saying, no, sit down, shut up, no, and it was embarrassing. It was so petty, because people want to ask him questions, and they are allowed to do that, but he refused to give way. He refused. To the point where Diane Abbott was almost like shaming them to shut up and sit down. It was embarrassing. Anyway, so this is where the quote comes from. Since the Conservative Party governs with the support of the 10 DUP members, of whom I am not one, I am very curious to know whether any member of the DUP will have advance notice of this economic analysis ahead of the Select Committee, or indeed in addition to the Select Committee. I'm going to link the stuff below later. So Mr. Walker's answer is, the simple answer is no. We would make this information available to the whole House on the same basis, while responding to the points on confidentiality that are covered in the opposition motion. So then there's the give way. So, it doesn't matter. If the Honourable Lady will give me one moment, I will give way. I just want to complete my point about the caveats to the analysis. At this very early stage, the analysis only considers the off-the-shelf arrangements that currently exist, and we have been very clear that these are not what we are seeking in the negotiation. It does not consider our desired outcome, which is the most ambitious relationship possible with the European Union. See, quote, context, right? As set out by the Prime Minister in her Florence speech, such an agreement is in the interests of both the UK and the EU. And to be crystal clear, it does not consider a comprehensive free trade agreement scenario, as some reports have suggested, but simply an average FTA. We believe that we can do much better given our unique starting point and shared history. Therefore, the scenarios in this analysis continue to suffer from the flaws that we have seen in previous analyses of this type. This is why the whole thing requires context, okay? And why the premise's answer was so short. Because he picked a very, very silly little quote. It does not consider our desired outcome, but the whole quote reads and makes it quite clear. Unless I'm being dense here, of course. I'm not. Honestly, I'm not. So, let's see if Corbyn can do any better with question 5, I think it is now. Okay. By the way, when he said okay, he was impressed. It was an impressed kind of okay. Like, because she gave such a short answer, he went, okay. That was genuinely how it sounded. So given that the Prime Minister ruled out any form of customs union, I think that's a consistent stance. We can't be a part of the customs union and without being part of the EU. They're not going to let us have that special thing, okay? We're worth too much to them anyway. A form of customs union post-Brexit. Can she explain how she expects then to avoid a hard border line with Europe? Now this is interesting, because this has actually been mentioned a lot over the last year, and on a number of occasions this has been in fair amounts of detail, quite a bit of detail in fact, being embellished upon, to the point where we pretty much know how it's going to be achieved, if it can be achieved, which I think it can, because we've been told time and time again. And the Prime Minister's answer kind of sums this up. The Right Honourable Gentleman and others have asked this question previously. I have already pointed out this in this chamber, that the government published papers last summer that showed how we can deliver exactly that. No hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and a bespoke economic partnership with the European Union. She's used the word bespoke a couple of times. It's worrying. Maybe she was maybe someone bet that she couldn't insert it into answers and decided, you know what? Hold my beer. I'll do this. It's not difficult. I absolutely agree with you. And so as far as I'm concerned, also, and I have to point this out, if May doesn't have to pick up a clipboard to answer your questions, or look at notes to give you a response, your questions are weak. Now, May makes an absolute tit of herself with some of the answers she gives in Prime Minister's questions. She does it all the time. And she'll do it on the next one because the joke is pretty cringy. But we get to talk about it for a bit. I like the fact that there's a meme going around that when she cracks a joke, he turns his head and yawns, which makes me want to yawn. It has nothing to do with me being up so early this morning, I promise. Anyway, the last question Corbyn asks, which has an interruption. One of many that are in this today, but it doesn't matter. We will get to the rest of it later. Maybe. Probably not, though. So, the Foreign Secretary recently made a speech about Brexit and found time to mention carrots, spam. This is Boris Johnson, by the way. If you don't know who he is, he's amazing and hilarious. Carrots, spam, V-signs, stag parties, and a plague of boils. Okay. I want you all to take a moment and just think to yourself, what kind of speech was he giving where he managed to talk about the EU and introduce carrots, spam, V-signs, stag parties, and a plague of boils? I'm going to go with farming. Let's go with rations. V-signs, the whole arrow sign thing, yep. Stag parties, because, you know, male supremacy after all. Fuck women. And a plague of boils. Wow, we do like our health here. Oh. Wait, what? Only... Oh, no, I do have a second channel. If you're talking to me, Earthman Brick, I have a main channel. Which is somewhere else. I do have to admit, I haven't seen the Foreign Secretary's speech. I'm going to find it, though. Because if he gave a speech about Brexit, right, but didn't mention the Northern Ireland border, then I guess it depends on, was he giving the speech in Ireland, or was he giving the speech as a whole and kind of disregarding Northern Ireland, the border, because it's kind of already been agreed upon, or because he just doesn't give a shit. It's possible it could be either or both even. It's Boris Johnson, he's unpredictable, which makes him hilarious, which is why when he, in the earlier question where he was mentioned, and he just turned his head and went, "What? That's bollocks." Considering how broad his language is, okay, he's quite a well-educated man. Obviously, he is. He sounds like half the time he's being flummoxed, or he is flummoxed, but he's not. He just rambles, and he gets back on point, and he's quite clever. So to hear him give a speech, this is why I think it's also important. Was it relevant to the speech? I think that's what I want to know, and I haven't had a chance to look at it. So there's not one mention of Northern Ireland in his speech. We're halfway through in the introduction. It's all the jeering. I don't think there's so much jeering actually, because hearing, I mean, it is pretty funny. I'd be laughing. So the speaker says, the honourable mention for Morecambe and Lonsdale, no one cares, must calm himself, it's not good for your health, blah 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 blah. You should appreciate my kindness. What a twat. When I was making the thumbnail for this, I was trying to find a really good pause face of Berko. There aren't many of him. I mean, I've noticed as he's been in that seat longer, his head's got bigger. And it's not even a joke, right? It's not even a joke. His head has actually gotten bigger. It's quite funny to see his just everything. I don't know if it's ego or an arrogant tumour, perhaps. I don't want to judge or assume too much, in case the tumour gets offended. So, we're halfway through the 6 speeches we were told would set out the government's negotiating position. So far, all we've had is waffle and empty rhetoric. There are quite a lot of criticisms levied at, for example, David Davis on these speeches. Even Jacob Rees-Mogg has absolutely attacked him for some of this shit. Businesses need to know. People want to know. Even the Prime Minister's backbenchers are demanding to know, but it's not clear from today's exchanges. Right. So, as far as the backbenchers go, this is a failing of the whip, really. But at the same time, if the party is divided on this, and they were divided during the whole referendum to begin with, I think that's a good thing. I think it is a very good thing that the party's divided, because it makes it more challenging for them to get it through or past their own party. They've got to work together, but at the same time they've got to agree or negotiate, which I'm on board with. I think it's a good thing to do, and you've got to think at the same time here that Labour themselves are not a very united party. They've got the progressive stack at the front doing their best to try and push identitarian bollocks, and at the same time contradict itself quite a number of times. I don't really understand how they do this, although it does explain why you're not able to do much against yes, he does. Jacob Rees-Mogg is a very articulate man. That's what I was looking for with Boris, but Boris is a more... He's like that drunken relative that is somehow intelligent and yet also quite easily confused. But he can debate and he can hold his own. It's obvious he can. Jacob Rees-Mogg is very calm. I'll give him that. I don't think he has... This is why this also mentioned they bring up the whole charismatic thing. 'Cause it's going to come up in a minute or two when I talk about this final answer that Theresa May gives. Because honestly, when you have a joke and you want to crack it, you've got to say it. You've got to at least have practiced it so you get it right. This is one of those times where, while a lot of Twitter have said that this joke wasn't said right, or was forced, or was delivered poorly, or that the response from the Conservatives was forced laughter, you have to kind of wonder. I do personally wonder, because I've listened to it back. I was listening to it while playing a video game, in fact, and making dinner. because apparently I had to rely on myself to cook. Where the whammons at? Anyway, let's get to this answer, because honestly I think I've waffled far too long now. I think I've mentioned to the right honourable gentleman before that his job is actually to ask a question, which, oh, that is such... The camera panned to him, but he didn't ask a question. He didn't ask one, okay? He gave a speech, and it was a baseless well, okay, a lot of his assertions come from, like, reading news articles and acting out, like, with some moral outrage. And that comes to bite him a number of times. It's a weakness on his part. And I do apologise if you're a Labour supporter. I really do. Look, Laura, we were talking on Discord just before I did this, okay? And you mentioned maple waffles, Mars bar waffles, every fucking type of waffle. I'm sure there's a Newcastle brown ale waffle and you'd probably still eat it. Yeah, the Mog train's probably going to run dry soon. So, but I'm perfectly happy to respond to the points he made. He said that we have not set out any detail. May I suggest to him that he needs to think very carefully about the security partnership that we want with the European Union that we have left. When we have left, sorry. This is key. I tend to agree with May on this. It's the whole point of not laying out all our cards on the table. If we do that, we are undermining ourselves. We are selling ourselves short. We're not getting the best deal. We're giving away the game. And that's not how you win. You don't win like that. People who want to just put everything on the table and say, that's what I've got, what can you give me? I call them losers. Because that's what you are. Your negotiating strategy is that, and to tell everyone what you were going to do. I'm sorry, but this isn't like boxing where you say, oh, I'm going to knock him out in the 4th round. Unless you deliver on it, you're just a bitch. An absolute bitch. Right. I set out in my speech in Munich last week exactly what we want that security partnership to cover, because we believe in ensuring that we are maintaining the security and safety of people here in the UK, but also in Europe. Okay. We're getting to that bad joke now. We are unconditionally committed to the safety and security of Europe. Ah, sigh. Deep breath, everyone. But may I congratulate him, because normally he stands up every week and asks me to sign a blank cheque, which he does. NHS, it's in crisis, spend, spend, spend! Honestly, and earlier in Premises Questions they were talking about a Labour Police Commissioner spending 10 million on office staff, but not on police officers on the street. The guy's a Labour... It's just... I'm sorry, you blame the Conservative government for what a Labour Commissioner is doing. It's amazing, right? I'll read this again, but may I congratulate him, because normally he stands up every week and asks me to sign a blank cheque. I know he likes cheques, but really that is terribly depressing. Okay, so we should probably talk about this a little. The whole cheque thing, about him meeting with people who are Czech, and so I think it was the Prophet. He linked me on Twitter a bunch of things from The Independent, written by Tom Watson. First of all, The Independent as a source, and I'm going to address this now. The Independent as a source, unless used to criticise The Independent, is not really much of a source. And Tom Watson is a member of the Shadow Cabinet. So even if it was considered highly credible for a moment, it actually wasn't. It was completely nullified because of bias. Actual party bias. Jeremy Corbyn has come out and said rubbish to a load of this, but if he actually wanted to and it was genuinely libel, he'd be suing them, and he'd publicly state he was going to. That's where I've become a bit more sceptical of Jeremy Corbyn, because if he really wanted to, he could. If this is genuinely false, he could sue them. That's a fact. And I think the fact that he isn't makes people wonder actually if there's any legitimacy to it, because if more information came out, it would come out, by the way. It would make him look even more like a bitch. I've said before and I'll say again, he is a weak leader. And he is as weak... He is weak like Theresa May. It's quite sad, really. So, to finish, there were 2 questions asked by the SNP, but, and this is quite interesting, the questions he asked, even though the entire theme, and I think this is a bit of a flip really, the theme has been Brexit. And in fact, the SNP, when they're not talking about RBS, are talking about Brexit, because most of Scotland voted to remain. Let's not forget here that there was still a percentage, a reasonable percentage that voted to leave. But he seems to forget this. In any case, he didn't. Ian Blackford focused his attentions on something else, and so we'll look at it. But I don't know much about UN law. In fact, I know fuck all. But I do agree with what has been said, and it's quite interesting because it was very cordial for once. Come on, last week I think he said that's rubbish. That's a lot of rubbish, possibly. Or was it the week before? It was the week before. Right. This question. Right, so. Yeah. That would actually make things a lot easier. At least 194 people have been killed in the last 48 hours in Eastern. I have no idea what that is. Check my Discord settings. Why am I checking my Discord settings, Mitch? Can you all hear me on YouTube here? Because oh no, ignore that. No, I think that's because I'm muted in a voice chat, but I'm not muted on OBS, which is fine. Sorry about that. Yes, so where's OBS? Here it is. In Eastern, and I have no idea what that country is. I mean, geography is not my strong point anyway. Come on, I don't even think Wales is a country. Will the Prime Minister tell the House what discussions her government have had with UN colleagues since Sunday on the enforcement of the existing UN resolutions that call for an end to sieges of civilian areas and attacks on civilians? Right. This is where my complete lack of knowledge comes into play. I don't know anything about, my apologies, this country. I don't know anything about the attacks either, or UN policy, which I think makes this very interesting. I did not have the time to look this up, which sucked, because I was too busy playing a video game. Okay, I have priorities. But also because I wanted to focus on the stupid questions, and he actually asked really reasonable questions, including, like, she gives a very good detailed answer. But the final question he asks, which is the one I went with, was equally actually good. In fact, this is where I have to condemn the UN, not the UN, Labour, because you had an opportunity to raise real concerns, but hell, you didn't even ask a question for your final one. Ian Blackford made you look like an absolute fucking idiot because you didn't take the opportunity presented. And I think this is a weakness on the part of Corbyn's team as well, because you're supposed to be giving him the very best opportunity to hammer home some real good points. If Jeremy Corbyn had asked those questions, I think Prime Minister's questions would have been a lot more cordial, a lot more interesting even. I don't even think Ian Blackford would have had backup questions for it. It's Syria. Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I actually didn't know. Probably because you know what? I probably did, because it was written on the bloody answers by Theresa May. Yep. Just saw that. I'm a genius. In any case, with the questions Corbyn asked, they were weak. They were not strong, and yet Twitter is indicating that Theresa May's answers weren't good enough. This is how divided our politics are, which I think is great, because you've got people saying Theresa May just rebuffed all of them, whereas others say she looked like a fucking idiot. That joke at the end, yeah, cringy as fuck. We don't know enough. We still haven't got all the details. Let's just sit on the fence for now, shall we? Yeah, that sounds reasonable, actually. I'm okay with that. There was a final thought. With regards to asking questions, there were a number of questions in this PMQ that did intrigue me, but they were they felt like they were the ones that were just like put there for everyone else. Like, this is here for your amusement. Yes. Congratulations. Oh, what do you call that? You call it like staged, I think? Yeah, stage. That sounds about right. In any case, and all of that aside, this Prime Minister's questions has been a bit petty. I don't think it was as hard-hitting. I think the questions were wasted. I think Jeremy Corbyn knows this. I think he knows he ruined it. He has had multiple opportunities in the past to absolutely hammer Theresa May. Hell, Jeremy Corbyn had a chance to do it David Cameron once, and he didn't do it. And I don't think that's him. I think that's the questions he's been given. Like, oh look, we can get a gotcha moment here. And that's what it felt like. Whereas with the SNP, for the last 2 weeks, last two PMQs, sorry, they focused on their local people receiving services and on the suffering of people who don't deserve it. Civilians don't deserve to suffer, of course not, so yeah. Anyway, provided this is on next week, I intend to address the questions then. And hopefully continue to do so for the foreseeable future, because it is somewhat educational for me, because I like doing the research that goes into this, because when I look up information for this, whether it be some reports that I was looking at before, or the definitions for working law in the UK, which I knew about before Brexit, but I had to remind myself a little. But also finding sources for this was quite fun. I feel like learning about, or doing PMQs, is a bit of a learning experience. And yes, Sentry, I can agree with you. The way it goes down compared to older ones, it's quite interesting. I think with how people have changed, it's become more volatile than it once was, which is a shame. Because I've watched older ones, even with Margaret Thatcher, the first televised ones, including one where he asks her a question, and it's just embarrassing, to be honest. Yeah. So anyway, I think I'm done here. If you want to watch it or read it, which is easier because you don't have to hear all their stupid voices, they are linked in the description with some sources. So I hope you'll have a lovely evening, and thank you all for joining me. See you all next week, hopefully.